Hi, my name is Chris Jones and I am the Managing Director at PSE Consulting. Welcome to our Payments Innovation series. Today I'm talking to Paul Butterworth, who is the Country Manager in the UK for Abrantix. Hi there, Paul.
Good morning, Chris. Good to talk to you.
So today we're going to talk about SoftPOS. SoftPOS is something that we've heard about for a long time, but perhaps we could kick off by getting your perspective on what you see SoftPOS actually is, and perhaps why it's different from historical manifestations of terminals like MPOS and traditional points of sale.
Sure. So I see SoftPOS as really the next evolution of MPOS. We've gone through MPOS, started off with those little devices that plugged into ports, and then we had the iZettls that initially plugged into phones, and then we end up with the MPOS that we're all familiar with, that you use in coffee shops all the time, the SumUps and PayPal here and iZettle devices that you put your PIN into. And SoftPOS is the migration of that to take away the sort of costly hardware and basically run it all on the phone. So it's a phone becomes your payment acceptance device. You can imagine a window cleaner coming to your house, cleaning your windows, saying he wants £30. He pulls out his phone and you tap your card or your Apple Pay on the back of his phone to perform a very standard payment transaction. That's really the evolution of SoftPOS, the next, and it's sort of moving forward from there. So it's really turning every phone into an acceptance device, really. Anyone can accept a payment card.
That sounds very exciting. Why is it that it's taken us a little while to get to the point where when you walk down the high street, you don't just see those traditional MPOS and dedicated hardware acceptance points?
I think there's been a lot of mindset changes that have had to go on to be able to get to this point. So for years, we were always told that you've got to really protect your card and your PIN, and you only put it into a device that you recognize on the counter. And for the last few years, we've got used to sort of putting our cards and PINs into little sort of handheld devices. And there's a mindset change for a start to be able to get to the point when I'm willing to tap my card and potentially tap my PIN into a guy on a market stall's phone. We've always been told to really protect our PINs. That's one part of it. And then the other part of it is the PCI body, who are the guys that define all the security standards around cards. They've been really protective for good reason in keeping cards and card data secure and keeping pins and pin data secure. And it's tricky to work out how to make these sort of solutions secure enough such that your card data is protected and you're okay, and make sure that they're workable and there's trust in the ecosystem. A lot of it is about making people trust these solutions.
And picking up on that point on consumer concerns about SoftPOS, it'd be interesting to get your views on whether you think consumers are ready to walk into a store and use the shop owner's device as opposed to a brand they may well have seen before and seen in other locations.
I think that's a really good question, Chris, and I really don't know the answer. Everyone's assuming that consumers will be happy to do that, and I think it'll probably start off slightly slowly. I think people will start off getting used to doing it with people they know and with stores that they recognize and with the window cleaner that comes to your house every month. I think you'd sort of trust that sort of environment. Whether you'd be willing on day one of SoftPOS to walk up to some guy in a market stall that you've never known and type in your phone. I think there's a learning we've got to go through to get there. I think it'll also vary per country. In the UK, we're very well protected with cards. We've got a good consumer protections out there. But I think that's one of the big things. I think there's going to be a lot of pilots going on to see what consumer behavior is like, and see whether consumers do accept this. The belief in the card industry is that it will happen and everyone's getting more relaxed about it. There's been studies done in Asia and everyone's saying, yeah, it's fine, we'll do that. But Asia's slightly different. They do a lot of payment transactions by scanning QR codes. We don't see so much of that in the UK in particular. So I think that's a really good question. I think we'll have to wait and see what happens.
So do you think it'll be a little bit like contactless, that a little bit of initial consumer reticence, but then particularly when it's part of people's day-to-day activities, tapping on London Transport, etc., that it just becomes a normal way of doing things?
I think London Transport, so I was in contactless when it first started. I worked for the company that sort of deployed the first readers in the UK. And that's sort of taken 10 years to get to this. And really the thing that's pushed contactless over the limit is COVID. So little corner shops, like the corner shop that I go to buy my newspapers from, didn't accept low value contactless transactions until COVID came along. If it was below sort of a couple of pounds, they'd ask you to pay with cash. COVID has sort of been a driver that's made that happen. And it's really changed adoption. So I'm hoping that SoftPOS doesn't take as long as contactless to get adoption, because it's taken a good 10 years to get to the point it is now, when everyone's accepting contactless, and that's never going to change back. I think it'll be quicker. I think people are quicker at change. I think the PIN side of things is going to be a bit more of a challenge. I think people will be more comfortable when they're paying with things like Apple Pay and Samsung Pay against someone's device, because you don't actually have to type in your PIN. But I think the mindset of me taking someone else's phone, typing my PIN into their phone, I think that's going to take a little bit of getting used to. And that's sort of, it's the crown jewels, right? You've been told never to give your PIN to anyone, and now you're typing it into some stranger's phone.
Yeah, and I suppose as we look forward over the next year or two, aside from consumer familiarity, what other things need to change to move us from a situation where you've got a number of institutions doing pilots to one where you see a lot of merchants deciding to use SoftPOS as a cheaper alternative to running dedicated hardware?
So I think we need formal blessings by the bodies that be, like PCI and all the card schemes, that these standards are there. So today, there's been an evolution. There was a thing called Spock, where you basically had a separate card reading device and a phone, and you put your PIN into the phone and you put your card into the card reading device, like a low-end MPOS. The next standard of that was called CPOC, which is basically your phone becomes the acceptance device and you're just tapping a card on. But CPOC is a PCI spec that's out there today, but it doesn't allow PIN, and that's really useless for anyone. It's too low value. So the next evolution, and Visa and MasterCard have got pilot specs about this, is basically tap to phone and PIN. So you take your card, you tap it on your phone, or you take your Apple Pay and you tap it on your phone, and you type your PIN into the device. So that's great, that's coming. But they're only pilot specs, so you can only do like pilots for 1,000 people. End of next year, we're expecting formal specs from PCI. And I think once there's a formal spec out there and companies can go through formal certifications, albeit being very painful, they are going to be painful certifications, then I think that will help confidence, because when a retailer can go to their standard acquirer like WorldPay or Worldline or someone like that and get the solution as a standard one off the shelf, I think there'll be a bit more comfort in the systems with that. But it's going to be a challenge. It's going to be there's a lot of work to be done to get these specs to a point when they are secure enough and implementable enough. And then there are always going to be people trying to defraud these sort of systems. They're open, they're running on an Android phone. How do I know that the application I'm downloading is the one from WorldPay and isn't some clone that some guys created and put onto the App Store that's gathering my data? I mean, there's all sorts of challenges like that we've really got to work out how we get over. And I don't think the industry's really done that yet.
And the UK has done a pretty good job in many cases at being at the forefront of this innovation. But for historical reasons, the UK runs an offline PIN environment. It'd be good to get your views on maybe how that may inhibit the UK's ability to adopt SoftPOS.
Sure. So there's a few countries. There's the UK, France, Finland, I think Israel as well. And by online PIN, what we mean is in the UK, when you put your card into a PIN pad and you type your PIN into the PIN pad, it's the card that validates the PIN rather than the bank. Whereas if you go into Spain and you put your card into a PIN pad, it gets validated at the back end. Now, where that's useful is in contactless. In the UK, in contactless, we're all aware, you tap your card and you can do a £45 transaction. And if it's above £45, you have to put it in and put in a PIN. In Spain, I can tap my card and put in a PIN for any value transaction. Now, when we go to this being my acceptance device, so it's my phone and the app's running on my phone, and I'm tapping a card against it, I want to be able to perform high value transactions. So the UK has a real challenge that we don't have online PIN. Now, a lot of banks can actually do it and can support it, but as a standard, it's not here. Where it's okay is if this is my acceptance device and I'm paying with a phone, then you've got high value capability, because when you're authenticating yourself like you are in Apple Pay using your Face ID or fingerprint, then you can do a high value transaction. So the UK's got some hurdles to get over with this. The UK, as you said, is at the forefront of adopting this. We've been running pilots for years. I was involved with WorldPay a few years ago when they were doing a pilot where they tried this sort of solution that we're talking about today about 5 years ago. So we've done lots of trials in there. But the PIN thing is a problem for us. It's going to cause us some pain. There are lobbies that are talking about changing to online PIN. And as I said, a lot of the bigger issuers can support online PIN, but it's, as a standard, we are an offline PIN market. So that's not going to help this sort of adoption.
And maybe just a final question. If you have to look into your crystal ball and say at what point SoftPOS becomes a regular experience on the high street? How far away are we away from that?
I don't think we're too long. I think it's probably 2-3 years until it sort of becomes pretty standard that your window cleaner and the people that are maybe a courier coming to the house will be doing card on collection. I think it's going to come. I think in 3 years we'll start to see 2 or 3 years we'll start to see these out there quite a lot. I mean, if you look at the adoption of MPOS over the last couple of years, that's done massive growth despite the challenges in those sort of in those solutions, because they're heavily subsidized. When you buy one of those readers, they're heavily subsidized. So I think it will adopt pretty quickly once it's sort of out there and the standards are finalized. There's hundreds of players. So I've got a list of about 30 different vendors who are claiming they're going to do this. I think that's going to drop. I think that'll drop down to about 5 because it's expensive. The certifications are costly. Keeping the apps updated to keep the security there is going to be a real challenge. So, but I do think we'll see significant adoption of this within 2 or 3 years.
So Paul, thanks very much for your time today and such useful insights into the world of SoftPOS. So thank you again for your time.
It was great to talk to you. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.